Welcome back. We are back and better than ever, ready to go here, queued up with an episode. Sorry for the layoff that we had here recently. When the holiday seasons are upon us, it is difficult to get schedules together, and we have attempted on a couple of occasions here recently to try to get an episode together. We actually want to bring in a colleague of ours to discuss what had been going on down in Venezuela and to kind of talk about governmental policies between different, like Democratic Republic versus communism, socialism, things of that nature, but it just hasn't worked out. And with Thanksgiving and things of that nature, it has been difficult. But I talked to Mike, who unfortunately isn't with us tonight. He took a trip over the weekend and just getting settled back in and everything. So I told him I wanted to knock an episode out over the weekend, and I unfortunately got jammed up on Saturday and wasn't able to get it out. We had a couple things going on with some family stuff yesterday, so got home today and wanted to carve out some time here today to go through this episode. I've had a lot kind of rattling around, some things on my list of topics that I wanted to discuss and talk about. And so what I thought we would cover today is, there's been a lot of discussion here recently about going back maybe a couple months ago to what the Republicans were going to do with the ACA and Obamacare, and then here recently with the decision to repeal net neutrality. There's been a lot of discussion about what these two economic activities are all about, and then a lot of discussion in particular on if indeed these things are, as I've seen them referred to, rights, natural rights, things that we are entitled to, or that we should maybe expect a certain outcome when engaging in these economic activities. And this has led to a lot of banter that I've seen specifically on social media, on my Facebook page and Twitter timeline, with people that I just think really don't understand the basics of economics. And I mean, they're well-intentioned people. They mean well, and it's like they're almost there. It's like they almost can grasp, I think, what's going on, but I think they're just off base a little bit. So I thought what I would do today is use both healthcare and internet economies to talk a little bit about an opportunity to do some basic economic 101 discussion here as it relates to free market capitalism. And so I want to start off with a disclaimer by making very clear what I'm sure everybody who knows me would agree with. And that is that I am in no way, shape, or form a expert on the healthcare industry or the internet economy. I certainly, know some economic policy, and I don't want to get into too much of what the government does or does not do in terms of regulation or policing of these markets. But I want to talk more hypothetically from an economic theory perspective. If we apply the basics of free markets system, how these things should operate, and this would be true of many markets in our economy. Now, it just so happens that these two markets are heavily regulated by the government, but I think it's important to have a discussion about what, in theory, this should look like based on, again, the principles of free market capitalism. So what I'm going to do is kind of run through some definitions defining some of what goes on in the market and talk theoretically and a little bit of reality here. So I want to kind of start off by talking about the way in which the market is set up. I see this argument made about healthcare and the internet even to a lesser extent, but more so with healthcare. And there are members of Congress and the Senate that make these claims about healthcare being a natural right. Now, when I get into talking about this, if I lose you, I would really encourage you to go back and read Adam Smith, go back and read John Locke, go back and read John Stuart Mill. And these are some philosophers that were born out of the Enlightenment that talk a lot about the ideas of private property and natural rights and things of that nature. And I think it'll give you a really good understanding as to what I'm talking about. So again, if this is confusing at all, those guys are a little difficult to read, but certainly the main points kind of shine through once you kind of read through them. It may take you a take or two to get through it, but I think you'll understand where they're coming from. And that is essentially this, and most philosophers and economists would agree with this kind of rationale. And that is, when you think about the materials that it takes to operate in the healthcare market, these things do not occur in nature. That is to say, for example, like land, water, natural resources, iron ore, trees, any other minerals and things of that nature. Those exist naturally. So people have a claim to those, have a right to those. For instance, I can claim a plot of land as mine, and that gives me the ability to be able to operate within certain confines on that land. I can build, I can plant, I can grow, I can cultivate. I can do all these different things on my land, and I have a certain right to that because it exists by nature. So what we see here is that the products that go into the healthcare market do not exist naturally. And let me explain what I mean. One isn't going to walk down the street and naturally see a hospital bed, an x-ray machine, an MRI machine, medicines, doctors, nurses, the materials that it takes to run a hospital or a health facility. These things don't exist in nature. And you might be thinking, come on, man, what's the point? What are you getting to here? Anybody knows that. Well, I think that's oftentimes overlooked or not considered when thinking about whether or not healthcare is a natural right that we as citizens of this country should enjoy. And I'm making the claim, obviously, here that it is not. And the reason being is that somebody or some group of people has taken the opportunity, and not just the opportunity, but the risk of putting the materials and resources together to provide those supplies to the market. And so, whether it's a company like Hillrom, Lilly, Pfizer, Merck, whatever it might be, these companies are taking risks in getting all of the materials organized to provide their goods and services to the market. And this is where we get into Economics 101. This is an exercise that I do with my economics class. I have them choose a product or a company and look at all of what we call the factors of production, the land, the capital, the resources, and the people that it takes to organize and get these products and services ready to deliver to the market. Because as we've just acknowledged, they don't exist in nature. And not only does it take all of that coming together voluntarily, that is a huge thing. Nobody is holding a gun to the owner of those companies or the CEOs of those companies and saying, produce these for the market. It's happening out of a recognized need in the marketplace. And so they are taking great risks. There's no guarantees that the products and services that they're going to provide to the market are going to be effective, that i.e. that the market is going to want them. And so when you think about, and I would encourage you to do this, think about a product that you consume and think about all of the different resources that are needed to bring that product to market, all the cooperation that is needed between different parties. There is a famous poem or writing out there called I Pencil that talks about this with the pencil, where when you think about it, it really is a miracle that the pencil has been brought to market the way that it has. When you think about the lumberjack, when you think about the guy running the sawmill, when you think about the paint, the graphite, the rubber, the metal, everything needed to produce a pencil and how it all kind of comes together. Now, this is what Adam Smith kind of talked about in terms of the invisible hand, right? The thing that kind of drives the force of, providing the wants and needs to the marketplace, and that this cooperation happens voluntarily, and that we all do it to produce a greater outcome in society. And so when we think about what motivates and drives an individual or a group of individuals to participate in these activities, we also acknowledge they do this out of profit motive, right? That's what drives a company into providing goods and services to the market. Now, deep down in their heart, they may feel like, hey, I'm providing a good or service to the marketplace, and that might make you feel really good, and you may have a desire and a love for what you do, and that's all fantastic. But at the end of the day, none of that will pay for the resources that it takes. It won't pay for the people to run the machinery. It won't pay for the capacity, the building, the capital that you need to produce your product. That takes capital. That takes money. And it may come in the form of investors early on, but once you start to sell your product and the market has identified that there is a desire for it, that is what will drive your product at the market. And so you want to maximize the profit, maximize the return that you get for providing the goods and services that you are to the market. So those are all very, very key things to consider and not just gloss over, because otherwise, if you don't acknowledge that and you don't recognize that, then yes, it is easy to say and view it as, well, healthcare is a natural right because these things just exist and these companies should be producing this for my benefit and my good, and I shouldn't have to pay for it. I shouldn't have to take any responsibility in meeting my end as a consumer in the exchange in the market, which is what we're going to be talking about here shortly. Now, this same idea can be applied in the world of the internet, right? When we talk about companies that are taking risks to organize the fiber optics, the capacity, the cabling, the building, the people, to deliver internet to your home. You are not entitled to have this, and it's just mind-blowing that I see people on social media just act like it's a foregone conclusion that internet is a basic right. Of course it is a very, very valuable asset in the 21st century. It provides us with great opportunities to communicate like never before. It is a beacon of opportunity to share and exchange ideas and things of that nature with other people. It gives us unprecedented access to material. There's so many positive benefits to the internet that I think a lot of people just jump to the conclusion, well, therefore I have to have it, right? It's just a natural thing that I should have, like the air that I breathe, the water that I drink, the land that I need to live off of, and that's just factually inaccurate. That is not the case. Again, some group of people have taken the opportunity to collectively and voluntarily organize the resources to provide this good and service to you to use, and you have to pay for it, right? You have to pay for it. Now, the structure of what that looks like and everything is determined by the buyer, which is the other part of the equation that we need to talk about here. So we've briefly kind of touched a little bit on the producer side, right? The risk that one takes or that a group of people take in providing a good or service to the marketplace is immense, and it shouldn't be lost on us that they do take these risks. And the reward for that, right, is the compensation that they charge for their product at market. Now, from a buyer side, we have the ultimate authority in this exchange of everything, because there obviously have been many instances in economic history of companies that have produced goods and services, delivered them to the market, and they failed miserably. And, you know, I want to just, not to get too far on sidetrack here, want to say, by the way, that should happen. That should be allowed to happen. When companies take risks in jumping into the market, if they fail, they should be allowed to fail. There should be no propping up of a particular product or industry simply because, as we said about a decade ago, they were, quote, too big to fail. When you talk about the financial industries, the automotive industries, those companies should have been allowed to fail. It would have made them stronger had they come out through it. And you know what? If they went away, something would have filled the void there. Now, would that have been rough? Absolutely. People would have lost their jobs. People would have lost, you know, certain wealth that they have built up through those companies. And again, that's risk. There's nothing that is solid and concrete when talking about a capitalist enterprise. That's what the whole system is based off of, is risk and reward. And so once you remove that element by trying to level the playing field and force the hand of an agency like the government to get involved and say you have to do something to save this company or save this industry, you're going to get disastrous results. And so I think you're seeing that kind of come to fruition a little bit. And we talked a little bit about this in previous episodes of where we are in the financial industry right now, and certainly the state of the automotive industry as well. So again, not to jump too far off the tracks here, but I did want to take a moment and kind of mention that as well here. Now, the ultimate veto power or the ultimate approval power in the market comes from the consumer. So once the company delivers the products and services to the marketplace, it is up to us as to whether or not we will accept or reject. Again, a voluntary exchange that we have. No matter how much you may feel like the product or service is a necessity in the way that you live your life, unless it meets the requirement of a natural element, something that you need to continue your life, then there is no natural claim to that. And therefore, you have a choice in whether or not you consume or reject the products and services. Again, the rules of the game can change. And I always find it odd that those that are clamoring for government regulation on things are always good with it when it meets their ends. But as soon as the government regulation takes away from what it is that they want, then all of a sudden, you know, they're crying foul about the way that the system is set up and it's crony capitalism and all this. But needless to say, either way, when the government gets involved in the market, it's going to screw it up. And there's going to be negative consequences to it. Now you see a lot of people that are upset about, you know, how profitable healthcare companies are and what's going to happen with internet companies when they can start throttling and charging for certain services to promote. And this is going to, you know, send us backward in where we are with technology. And the bottom line is, guys, it's very, very simple. We don't need to run to our state capitol buildings. We don't need to run to Washington, D.C. We just need to be proactive and be informed as consumers. And the moment that these companies start to act out of what we expect as consumers, we have the right to withdraw our consent. And the way that we do that is by voting with our dollars. You know, we get to step away from any offer that the company is putting out there. We do not have to accept any goods or services that a company is offering. So, for example, in the internet industry, if indeed a company like Comcast were to, for example, start to throttle your service of Netflix, or would, for whatever reason, cause a social media platform to become a paid platform, that is every right that they have. They have every single right to do that. And you have every single right to reject that and say, I am not going to do that. And that is the only true, pure method for causing the market to have to react a certain way, to correct itself, not just act a certain way to correct itself. So if you try to interject government regulation into this, or try to artificially mess with the market, you're not going to get the best outcome. Now, I do want to say, what most people don't really truly understand, in the short term, you're not going to like it. It's going to be rough and it's going to be difficult. But in the long run, right, which is really what we should be looking at here, because long run results are what we're all consequently focused on. Because you can take a little bit of a loss short term, if you're a company, if you're a consumer, you can take a little bit of a hit up front, but it's long term. What result is going to be produced? In the long run, when you allow the government when you allow the market to function on its own and naturally, you're going to get the best result as the consumer. consumer and as the producer. And so I want to encourage you guys to think about the power that we have as consumers. Now, I'm not talking boycotts here. I know that there's a lot of times people want to look at boycotts as a way of, being able to bring about action. I would say minimal at best in terms of results, right? Organized boycotts, you see these called for. Most recently, the big one on the NFL with everything. And the reality is that they may have some results short term, but really the biggest thing is once you vote with your dollars and the market realizes that now there is a niche. This is another thing that most people fail to see past beyond. Well, what happens if I no longer purchase my broadband Wi-Fi or my broadband internet through this company? What am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to have access to the internet. But there will be a recognition by the market that there is a niche, there is a need, and it will respond. I mean, you saw this happen in in a different order and kind of a little bit different circumstances. If you take, for example, like the breaking down of family video rental places, right? Like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and things of that nature, where the market saw that there was a niche for things like Redbox and Netflix and everything like that. So change, right? That's really what we're talking about here. Whether you're moving one direction or another, it's change that's going to force the industry to have to adapt. And if enough people are informed on what's going on and are basically withdrawing their consent for whatever's happening in the market with their dollars, then you will see change. To give you one quick example to start to wrap this up, in the healthcare industry, I read an article and heard a podcast on a doctor, I believe it was in the state of Kansas here within the last couple years, that has gone to opening up a clinic/hospital that is cash only. Cash only for all services that are rendered at the facility, and doesn't deal with insurance at all. Now, when you hear that, your instincts are probably, wow, this guy gets no business, right? Nobody's going to do that. That would cost you an arm and a leg. How in the world would you ever be able to afford, getting an X-ray on your arm, or getting an MRI done on your knee, or going to, get checked out for a sinus infection? The reality of the situation is, because he's cash only, he doesn't have to deal with the red tape of dealing with insurance and things of that nature. He doesn't have to deal with some of the other government programs that other hospitals are forced to have to go through. His products and services are very, very affordable. And again, by dealing with cash only, the consumer ends up getting the best product and service at the end, because there isn't that bureaucracy that they have to deal with in terms of getting things approved through insurance, having claims denied, and wasting all kinds of money and energy on fighting the insurance companies. So again, that is a way in which the market is recognizing that there's a niche here, that people are upset, that they're frustrated about what's going on in the healthcare industry. So, those are very, very slow to take foot. I understand that. And that's why I said in the short term, there's going to be a little bit of distress. But anytime there is that kind of an environment too, it always drives innovation. When you go back and look at what I would arguably say was one of the greatest generations in terms of progress, the 19th century, when you had individuals that were creating and inventing different medicines, different machinery, different products that they were bringing to the market that had never been seen before. The amount of progress that was made in society, right, was unbelievable. And where did it come from? It came from individuals. It came from people who were risk takers in the market that said, I'm going to go out on my own because I see a need for this in society. I see a need for machinery that will detassel corn quicker so that I can free up manual labor to do other things. I see a need for a medicine that will cure an illness that is striking so many people. I see a need for an automated process that will make it so much more inexpensive to produce manufactured goods. all of these things were done voluntarily by the market, not by an organizing force, not by some government bureaucrat sitting 3,000 miles away going, you know what the market really needs is this. And I really feel like the government should go reach out to people and see if they'll produce it. And you know what? That's probably going to be really efficient, and it's probably going to work well for society, because that has never happened. I can't think of one example. People try to point to FDR and the New Deal and everything like that, but there have been studies that have shown what the results of many of the New Deal agencies' workings had on our economy. And so again, that is a real quick economic lesson. The big takeaways, guys, please understand, you have to think this way. You have to ask yourself, do I have a right to a claim on this, no matter how important you think it is, right? And trust me, I live and breathe the internet. I understand what's at stake here. I get it. It's going to suck if this happens, some of what they're saying. But what will happen is the market will correct this. We cannot put our hope and trust in government to do it. And that ultimately it is our responsibility as buyers in the marketplace to hold the producers accountable and to give them every opportunity to allow the market to work naturally and not send government bureaucrats in to try to solve this thing, because I promise you it will not produce the best outcome in the long run. So again, I know that might be a very short, abbreviated lesson on the economics of why we always seem to expect a certain outcome and why we want that. You know, what you got to ask yourself that too. Why do you want that outcome? What good is that really going to serve you, other than to say, gosh, I have a really mediocre product that they charge me a tremendous amount of money for, but I feel hopeless in being able to make any progress against the company. But I'm telling you, it takes everybody to be aware and knowledgeable on what is happening to hold the company accountable. It can happen. It does happen. It's just a very difficult process, a lot of responsibility, which is something that we should embrace as consumers in the market. So again, like we usually do in this series, I think that's probably a perspective that you're not hearing a whole lot, especially if you're reading through some of the material on social media platforms and in various different websites. But I encourage you to look at that other side, look at that other perspective, and ask yourself the question, what could be the potential benefit of repealing net neutrality? What could be the potential benefit of deregulating the healthcare industry in a time where everybody is screaming for more regulation? So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, guys, we always appreciate that and welcome it. You can contact me directly on my Facebook page. I usually send out a link to our video podcasts on that. Twitter, you can get me on our Twitter handle there. Our email through Gmail is Margeson, MARGESON, and Spears, SPEARS, @gmail.com. And of course, we'll always welcome any comments or feedback that we get from you on that. So that's going to do it for our episode this evening. I think we're going to try to still organize a podcast over Venezuela with Mike, myself, and one of our cohorts, Lindsey Brown, to kind of discuss and talk about socialism in Venezuela and comparative governments across the globe. So until we get together next time, you've now heard the other side.